All right, so we're really happy to have Nick back. Nick Peachey is Director of Pedagogy at Peachey Publications, an independent digital publishing company that specializes in the design of digital learning materials. He's been involved in education since 1990 and has more than 20 years experience of working specifically with online and blended learning environments. He's worked all over the world, training teachers and developing innovative and creative products. And he's also a two-time winner of the British Council's Innovations Award. His customers include the British Council, Eton College, Open University, Google Creative Labs, and International House. His more recent projects have included 2 years as the pedagogical manager for a 100% online school owned by Macmillan ELT. And he was also the head of content development for Eton X, which is another 100% online school that's owned by Eton College. And he was also a content developer for an English and interfaith dialogue course designed for the British Council and Al-Azhar University in Cairo in Egypt. I told you that he is the author of several books. And again, you're going to see the links in his bio there to books like Hacking Creativity, Digital Tools for Teachers, Thinking Critically Through Digital Media, Digital Video, a manual for language teachers. That was the winner of the 2016 British Council Award for Innovation in Teacher Resources, as well as books like Conversation and Listening, Creativity in the ELT Classroom, Creativity and Sustainable Development Goals. And he's also the editor of a newsletter, an online newsletter called EdTech and ELT, and the link is also in his bio. So here to speak with us today with the presentation, Exploiting Infographics for Information and English Literacy, please help me welcome Professor Nick Peachey with a warm virtual round of applause. So if you have your cameras on, give Nick a wave, give him a thumbs up.
Nice to see so many people here. Can you hear me okay? Can you type in a yes if you're hearing everything okay? Okay, that's great. I'll just share my screen. Should come up for you soon. Okay, this session is on exploiting infographics for language practice and information literacy. I don't know how many of you use infographics already, but I'm an infographic addict, if you like. I'm sort of become a bit obsessed with them because I find them so really useful. I'll just need to check the chat. Yeah. Okay, and let's see if we can get started. It's a bit late here, so it's after 10 o'clock, so I'm usually in bed by 10 o'clock. So you might have to wake me up a few times halfway through or something. During the session, we'll give you a quick break for a breakout session where you can have a chat with each other. And I'll try and be here when you get back from that. So, don't drift off yourselves if you're in the breakout rooms and you don't want to participate, because we'll have a second session as well, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. Okay, right, so let's get started. So I've just changed to the next slide. Hopefully you can see that now. I had a big introduction, so I don't really need to say anything more about myself, I don't think. I'm Nick Peachey. I'm Pedagogical Director of Peachey Publications, which is my own company where I write and publish materials. And if you want to check that out later, I'll give you the presentation, a link to this presentation, and there are links here to my Twitter presence, LinkedIn presence, and to the website. So you can come back to the presentation later. I'll give you a link to that at the end. So let's get started. I'll start off with a definition of information literacy, and this comes from the Association of Library and Information Services here in the UK. Just in case we're not all on the same page here, information literacy is the ability to critically to think critically and make balanced judgments about any information we find or use. So there's a good definition of it there just to get started with. And why is it important? Well, it's important for a number of reasons for our students. I think, you know, we live in an age where authoritative and credible sources are no longer defined by the library. You know, it used to be when I was a student that if you wanted to know something and you wanted to know whether it was true or not, you went to the library and there it was. But, you know, increasingly our students don't use things like libraries. They don't have, you know, they may not have sort of credible, reliable newspapers, and they need to be able to sort of approach information with a degree of skepticism and in some ways cynicism. You know, as we've probably seen, if any of you are following the news about Ukraine, what's happening in Ukraine, you know, the difference between the reporting here and the reporting in Russia, for example, is huge. You know, people have information coming at them all the time. How do they know what to believe and what's credible? So I think sort of developing that information literacy is very important. We also live in an age now where anyone can create and share information that looks real. You know, anyone can put a WordPress website together or a blog together, and it looks as good as the BBC or CNN. You know, it looks just as convincing. So it's not like, you know, when the web first started out, you could see which websites were homemade. Everything looks very professional now. It's very easy to make it look professional. So, you know, it becomes harder for our students to recognize what is, you know, real and what is fake, you know, and what sources are really credible. Information literacy can also help us improve our choices and make better decisions if we start to understand the information that we're facing and how it applies to us. And, you know, also we and our students need to be aware that the information that we receive is often manipulated, or it comes with biases. You know, information isn't, you know, it isn't, I'm looking for the word, what's the word? It isn't unbiased. You know, somebody's put information in front of you for a reason. You know, it isn't just facts. Somebody's put their slant on those facts and wants you to believe something. You know, and I think increasingly we need to make our students aware of this, especially kind of, you know, our teenage ones who tend to think that, you know, anything they find on the internet is the truth. You know, and as we all know, that isn't the case, and increasingly that's not the case. So that's why I feel that it's important. As for the infographics side of things, you know, I don't know how many of you use infographics, but this is a quick look at what an infographic is. Basically, it's information that's put into a graphical form. You know, there's an infographic here about infographics, and it has lots of information. It's quite dense, but it's also quite visual, you know, which is good for the internet because, you know, absorbing dense information and reading dense information from the computer screen can be very tiring and can be quite difficult. But the pictorial information and information like this in these infographics is much easier to digest. So they're very good for I think, for the internet and for web-based lessons. I've just got a quick question for you before we go on. I'd like to see how many of you have already used infographics in your teaching. If you've got a phone with a QR code scanner, you can scan the QR code and answer the questionnaire there. If you haven't got the QR code scanner, you can go to menti.com and type in the numerical code there, and you'll be able to answer the question there. I'll give you a couple of minutes to have a look at that and to do that so that we know where we're coming from. And then we can have a look at our collective results. So quite a lot of people in the sometimes area, also in quite a lot in the not often and never area, and just a few in the often. Okay, that's good anyway. Hopefully there'll be something new even if you use them quite regularly. Okay, so why should we be using them in English language teaching? Here are a few quotes from different people who use them. You know, they can convey dense information in an easy to read way. As I said, statistical information can be very difficult to read off the screen, but in an infographic, it makes it much easier. They're less language dependent, so they're easier for lower levels because they have the visuals and the pictures to reinforce meaning. They can be more stimulating for visual learners as well. They're richer in colour, and research says that information displayed in this way can be easier to remember as well. The images aid understanding and the concepts help memory. It can reduce screen fatigue. They can be very vocabulary rich as well. Although there's not much grammar in infographics in the actual reading of them, vocabulary-wise, they can be vocabulary rich, which is good for learners as well. Dealing with graphical information is great for their academic skills, and we can use them to encourage critical thinking and develop their information literacy. So that's a bit of my justification for using them. So let's move on to tasks and actually have a look at some tasks, because it's great to say, yeah, we should be using them, but how? It's not just a matter of sticking them in front of our students and saying, hey, read this. So what are we going to do with them? And also, what can we do with them in a reasonable amount of time that doesn't involve a lot of preparation? So these are a few example tasks. One of my favourite tasks is fact-finding, and this is a great task to use with an infographic because you can use it with almost any infographic. You can ask your students to look at it, read it, and find 5 facts, 5 interesting facts. I'll share a link to this one with you as well through the chat. This is a nice one about breakfast around the world and the different breakfasts you can find around the world. And it has some statistics about eating breakfast and why it's good for you and that kind of thing. So, my first task for that, for my students to get them reading it, would be just to find 5 facts and why they think they're significant. And then they can sort of discuss those together, which ones they chose and which ones they thought were significant. And this will, it's a nice generic task that will work with almost any infographic because, it doesn't take any preparation and all infographics have some information in them. So if you're looking for a quick task that you can do with your students, then that's a good one. One of the other tasks that I really like is this idea of peer-created quizzes, and this is an infographic about spaceships. Let's see if I'll see if I can get the infographic for you. Probably a more suitable one for boys, although maybe not. Yeah. So these are different spaceships from science fiction. And instead of creating a task yourself, the thing to do would be to give the infographic to your students, put them in groups and get them to write their own quiz to test each other. Because then they look at the information quite carefully then, because they're trying to come up with good questions, and it saves you a lot of work as well. They could come up with some very good questions and you can use them in your next class. And again, that's a task that will work with almost any infographic you have. Give it to the students, get them to write the questions in groups, and then test each other's knowledge. You can be looking on Facebook or something like that while they're doing that and having a break. But that's another good task and I think a useful one. Another one that I like is actually research and fact checking. This is a nice one about men and women, and I'll give you the link to this one as well. I'll put it into chat so you can have a look at it. And most of these infographics, they have lots of statistics. And usually when they do, at the bottom here, I hope you can see this, they have an area which shows their sources. And It's amazing how if you tell someone what the source of your information is, they believe it's true without ever checking those sources to see whether they come from that source. And so a nice thing to do is give students an infographic, give them those sources and say, hey, look, go and check to see if this information is correct. Did it really come from here, or is that just something that someone's made up and put there? There's a statistic that says 80% of all statistics are made up, and and that's one that I just made up. But people seem to sort of believe things when you tell them, oh, it's a statistic. Sorry, I can't say that. It's a statistic and it's based on research. Yeah, okay, that must be true then, But actually, a lot of the times we don't follow this up to see whether it's actually true. So this is a great task to do with any kind of information like that. Okay, so that's a nice task as well. This is one that I like as well. It's to find yourself in the information, and this is a really nice one about sleeping positions. How do you sleep at night? What's your sleeping position at night? So I'll give you a link to this one and see if you can find yourself on it. There it is. So which kind of sleeper are you? Which kind of sleeper is your partner or your child? My youngest daughter's this one, the pet lover. She goes to bed with all her animals. She has a collection of about 20 animals that all have to be in bed with her. And if one of the 20 is missing, she can't go to sleep. My wife is this one. She's the gadget freak. She's always got, in the morning she has her iPad next to her and her phone, in bed. It's this one. So I'm not sure which one I am. I think I'm probably the zombie. But yeah, so you can get students to look at these things and find where they are in the information, and that's kind of a nice personal thing to do as well. It could be the same you could do the same or a similar thing with the statistics. When this last one that was about men and women, you could actually run the same kind of survey with your class and see if the statistics are similar or where they fall within the statistics. It's always good, and it really sort of personalizes the information for them, and they see that how it applies to them as well. This is a bit of a more of a kind of standard one. True-false questions are always very useful. And again, I'll pass you the link to this. This one's about language facts. Just getting true-false questions and checking whether students actually understand the statistics. A lot of students, actually a lot of people are very confused by statistical information, and it can be very easy to deceive someone with statistical information as well. I think it was Mark Twain who said that there are lies, and then there are damned lies, and then there are statistics, And so you can use and manipulate statistics to confuse people and to tell them different things. So I think it's worth getting students to have a look at the statistics and making sure that they actually understand what that means, And true-false questions are quite good for that, whether they've interpreted, to check whether they've interpreted the information correctly, I think is quite useful. This is one of my favorites, actually. And this one is about, actually checking bias and trying to see why somebody has shared this information. And this is quite an interesting one. I'll share the link to the infographic with you. And it's one that compares women's body size and shape and how the shapes and sizes of women's bodies changed between 1950 and 2010. And according to this infographic and the research that they quote, that women are getting bigger and fatter and heavier. And so, you know, what I decided to do was get my students to look at why somebody presenting this information, not just is it true, but why is it presented, and going to look at the source. And it turned out that the source was a magazine article or something that looked like a magazine article. But within the magazine article, it was heavy and thick with advertisements for cosmetic surgery. So, you know, that for me, that was where the bias is. Somebody's sharing this information with you because they want you to feel bad in order for you to do, you know, this. And so that's a nice example to show students and help them understand that, you know, okay, this information is here, but it's here for a reason. You know, even if it's true, you know, why is somebody sharing this information with you? What do they want to achieve? What do they want you to understand from this information? How do they want to influence what you believe? You know, and I think that's probably one of the most important questions that you can get students to ask about any information they come across. You know, and again, you know, going back to this Russia-Ukraine conflict, you know, there are these different sides of pushing information at us all the time. You know, what's their bias? What do they want us to believe? What do they want to achieve by it? You know, information is never, I keep looking, it's never neutral. You know, somebody wants you to believe something and they want you to believe it for a reason. So, you know, getting students to look for that reason, I think is very useful and very good to get them talking about. This is another one, there's a personal response and actually doing something with the information. So often we get, you know, we give students information, we give them a text to read or something like that. They read it and they answer questions, but that doesn't really touch them at all. That's not part of their lives. So we can get them, if we can give them information that they can do something with or make decisions about for themselves, I think that's very good. And this example is infographic is information about London and Paris. And what you can do is, you know, give it to your students, and based on the information that they find, they have to decide which of the two cities they would prefer to visit. They can either visit Paris or London. You could actually give them a budget because it has information about how much things cost and places to visit and things like that. So they can compare the two, decide which one they want to go to. You could give them a budget and they could decide, you know, which places they would visit, how much they would spend in each one. But, you know, it's a nice way to get them actually using the information they find in a kind of more personal way and applying it to their own lives in that way. And again, you know, this isn't a task that only works with this infographic. It can work with others as well. Hopefully these tasks are quite generic. This task is an infographic about women in leadership. Again, I'll pass the link to you. It's about women in leadership, and actually, it's a useful one. Or infographics like this are quite useful to use to get for writing activities and to get students writing. So often, you know, as an academic or as a student studying at university, you have to write reports. So, you know, give them an infographic, get them to study it, and convert it into a text so that they can give a report on it. I'm putting I've just had a question through the chat. I'm putting all of the links into the chat, so you can click on the links in the chat to get the infographics. I'll also share a link to the presentation at the end, so you can get them all and some other stuff with that as well. So yeah, this task would be, okay, take the information that's in the infographic, present it as a text, write it as a report or a blog post or a newspaper article or something like that. And in that way, you know, students are having to process the information and actually represent it. And that's a good way to kind of, for you to check what they really understand by this information and how much of it they understand, where they put their priorities as well. So that's kind of a nice writing task. If you want to get them to do a speaking task, you know, you can actually get them to convert it into a presentation and do a verbal presentation of the infographic as well. Again, I'll pass the link to this one for you as well through chat. There it is. So you can actually give them an infographic and say, hey, you've got to present this, put together an oral presentation. They could put together a PowerPoint presentation to go with it as well. And they sort of present the information to the rest of the class. You could give different students different infographics, put them in groups, get them to do presentations to each other. But that's a nice way of sort of pulling the information out and making it verbal and making it into a speaking exercise. This is the last of the tasks that I'll give you, and that the last generic task, and that's, you know, actually use the information in a useful way. You know, information should be used, and this is one about how not to look ugly on a webcam, something that can be very useful in these days of Zoom meetings and Zoom classes. And it's basically sort of information that shows you how to get the, you know, the best from your appearance, when you're doing a meeting on a webcam, you know, how to get the best connection, restarting your computer before you start the class. So it's all really useful information that you can give them and that they can use. Okay, so how many tasks was that? How many tasks have I given you so far? Can you remember? Just take a moment and see how many you can remember and how many of those infographics you can remember. I'll give you a minute to think back through it while I have some water. We've got anything between 8 and 12, so that's quite a variety, isn't it? Okay, let's go backwards and count them. Okay, we've got this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bias, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's it. Well done. Anyone, whoever put 10 in, you've done really well. Great. Okay, let's go back to that 10th one. So 10 different tasks so far and 10 different infographics. What I'd like to do at this point is to put you into breakout rooms to discuss those tasks and think about which of the tasks and which of the infographics you like the most, which ones you would like try to use with your students and why. And you could sort of share information about any infographics you've already used if you have. Okay, so I'll just give you 10 minutes in a breakout room, discuss the ones you've seen, which ones do you like best, and what other uses have you used them for. Okay.
Okay, so I will go ahead and open up these rooms. Again, this is one of the things that you always say you like the most from the NCTE sessions and the PD Talk sessions, that chance to have a little bit of interaction with your peers from around the world. So please take advantage of these 10 minutes and then we will come back for the rest of Nick's talk.
I'll have a few more ideas afterwards and a free app. Okay, so
hey.
come back for that. Okay, thanks for that. And it was interesting going around. Went round and had a listen to a few people. I think it sounds like quite a few people have tried some of these out and tried out some infographics, which is great. Also, some interesting comments about, the difficulties of sometimes it's difficult to see them. If you're doing them as a group, if you've got them on a big screen, that's okay. But sometimes, it's great to get students to scan them onto their mobile phones, but you have to be sure that the resolution is okay and that they're going to be clear enough to read and things like that. It's good to teach students that they can swipe them with their fingers and enlarge them on their phones as well, because sometimes that doesn't occur to them. But that's quite good. Also, lots of people talking about making infographics, which is what I'll come on to next as well. Just before that, I think I've given you a whole bunch of different tasks that you can use, and I think they're all useful tasks and generic tasks, but they should come within the structure of an overall lesson. And this is sort of a basic, lesson structure that I use for the most of the infographic lessons that I develop myself. And that's, this is the kind of structure I use before I get them to look at the infographic. I get them to sort of explore their existing knowledge, as you would with any reading task. Before you drop them into the reading, you get them to sort of explore what's their existing knowledge about the topic, get them to discuss the topic. And then the second stage, then they start to look at the information and analyze the information, try one of these tasks. Research its reliability. You can also get them to carry out independent research, so not just checking the sources, but actually doing their own research, maybe putting together a questionnaire and finding out, from their social media contacts whether they have the same information, maybe sort of doing their own version of the infographic to find out whether the information comes the same. Or researching online, and also examining how it applies to their life. I think that's very important to sort of see, what does this information mean to you? How does it change your life? What impact does it have? And then usually I finish with a task that, is to consolidate what they've learned so that they share what they've learned from the information that they've found. We don't go and look at information and research information just for no reason. We do it with a purpose, so we should sort of be resharing what we've learned from what we've studied as well. And those are the kind of typical stages that I put into my own lesson plans for infographics. Some sources here. These are 4 common sources where I usually find them. There's one called e-learning infographics, which is sort of all infographics about education. You can pull these out of the presentation later, but I'll put them in there now just in case you want them. There's daily infographics, which is a nice one, and they send you an email every day with a different infographic in if you sign up for their newsletter, which is sort of quite useful because it becomes a kind of reminder. If you get, the ones that they send each day aren't always good and they're not always useful, but it's great to have that reminder every day that, there's a resource there that I can use. So that's one great good source. Another one that I like is called Cool Infographics. There's quite a few come from there. And the last section is Pinterest, and I actually save all the infographics that I find. I categorize and I save on Pinterest, and that's a great way for going back and finding them and for sharing them. So I've got a collection of nearly 400 that I've collected here, which are ones that I like to use with students. So I'll share the link to that with you as well. So you can go and have a look at those if you want and see if there's something that suits your students. Some nice ones I've found recently for young learners, an infographic about what your pet would say if it could talk, which is a kind of nice one. And there's a nice one on 50 facts about animals, if I can find it here. This one, I like animal facts, 50 amazing facts about animals. They can test them to see if they find out whether they're true. For example, the number 2 says cows can sleep standing up, but they only dream when they sleep lying down. How can we test that to find out if it's true? I'll share a link to that one with you because I like it so much. So, you know, you could get them to look at that and see which is the most amazing fact, or think about how they could test it. A hippo's sweat in pink. Hippo's sweat is pink. I don't know. I think somebody's just making those up, don't you? It's hard to know. Anyway, so those are good sources. Pinterest is really good as well, because if you start saving them on Pinterest, it starts suggesting similar ones for you. So every time you go there, you can go and find new ones, and maybe you'll discover something else interesting about hippos. I'm not sure what to do with that information though. Hippo's sweat is pink, and I'm sure I'll find something useful to do with it. The next part, I just want to sort of come on to some ideas for creating infographics. I mean, because we can create them ourselves, but even better is to get our students to create them. And these are some tasks for getting students to create infographics. Sorry, and there's an infographic here about the steps involved in creating an infographic as well. So that's kind of useful as well. I'll share that one with you. It has an article about it on there as well. So if you do want to get students creating them, there's some useful steps there. And I mean, these are just sort of 10 tasks that you could sort of try with your students. One is sort of infographic yourself. Create an infographic about yourself, you know, share information about yourself. It's a nice way to share information, good way for students to get to know each other. You can actually convert any text into infographics. You know, if, for example, you're getting your students to do a reading, whether it's a book that they're doing, is literature or stories are great, or if they're reading a magazine article that's full of facts, change it from being text into an infographic. And that helps them sort of pull out what they think are the most important points and sort of to display and share them. Number 3 is fan infographics. You know, get them to think about somebody who they admire, somebody who's a role model, and create an infographic about them. You know, there's some great ones about Nelson Mandela that I found and used with my classes. You can actually combine them with doing class surveys. So get them to create a survey. It could be based on one of the other infographics, gather information, and then display it as an infographic for the rest of the class. They can do social research infographics. So, you know, actually doing research through social media, asking questions through social media, or looking around and creating an infographic. You could just give them a theme. So for example, you know, ice cream, create an infographic about ice cream or chocolate or coffee, or, you know, anything that interests them. Number 7, process infographics are quite nice. It's a good way to get students thinking about processes, whether it's the process of creating a car or creating, you know, rain, or, you know, the process of planning an essay. They can create a visual representation of it in an infographic that shows how well they understand it and can help them understand it. Very good for visual thinkers. Historical timelines, and of course, the last 2 are very language-based, and that's sort of, you know, getting them to create maybe a vocabulary map if they're, you know, joining words together and adding images, or, you know, you can get them to do grammar infographics. There's lots of grammar infographics online actually. So if you search, you know, infographic plus a grammar tense, you'll find lots of them on Google Images as well. But you can get students to create their own to show what they've learned about the different grammar points. It's a nice way to get them sort of thinking about grammar in a visual way as well. So those are just a few tasks for creating infographics that I think are quite useful. It is quite a skill and you need tools. So these are some of 4 of my favorite tools for creating infographics. The first one, Drawio, is a very simple one. And you can just create a blank space, and then you can sort of drag different shapes or search for different images and sort of drag icons and things like that onto a sheet to create your infographic. And you can add text for it. And that's free and very easy to use and good for sort of small scale, very basic infographics if you want to do something quite light and easy. Oh, I forgot to share the link to that one with you. I'll share it just in case. So that one's Drawio, and that's good for creating diagrams as well. Genially is another of my favorites, and Genially is what I'm using for this presentation as well. You know, I find Genially really useful, and it has lots of infographics already built into it. My link there doesn't seem to want to work, but I'll share this one with you here. So Genially is great for creating infographics, and there's quite a big educational community on Genially. So if you want to find inspiration and you go to Genially, there's actually a label at the side that says inspiration, and if you click on it, it will show you all the different ones that different people have prepared. I can actually show you now. There it is, inspiration. There's lots of presentations there and lots of infographics as well you can find that other people have made. And this is sort of, a lot of these are made by educators, so well worth checking out. Canva is very good. I heard somebody mentioning Canva when we were going around, another sort of free site as well. And again, it like Genially, it has lots of templates and things that you can use that you just need to adapt. So you may not have great design skills, but you can choose a template that's similar to the one you want to create, and then sort of use that as the basis of your own infographic. Sorry, losing my voice a bit here. And the last one is another one, again, very similar, and there's a free version, is Visme. And this one's very good for creating small and large infographics. And again, they have templates that are ready for you to adapt, so it's easy to use. All of these have free accounts available, so you don't have to pay for them. Or students don't have to pay for them as well if you get students making them. Okay, so those are some great tools. Okay, so that's as much as I have to offer. I have one more thing to offer actually, but before I offer you that, I'll put the code up if you want to ask any questions, or I'll also copy voting link. Yeah, I'll put the link into chat. If you've got any questions that you want to ask, you can put them in here, and I'll do my best to answer them. There's a link there, or there's voting instructions here. You can do it with a QR code. I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about questions, and then I'll come back and do my best to answer them. And then I'll give you a free app with some infographics in. Okay, so hang on for that. That's an interesting question. How can you grade an infographic? But by that, I take it you mean, in terms of language level for students and things like that. When I do it, I think, mostly, I mean, in the same way you would a text, I guess, although a lot of it, in a lot of cases, there isn't longer text in it. It's mainly the level of the vocabulary and the complexity of the vocabulary that you grade on. So that's how you decide how difficult it's going to be for students. There are some infographics that do have a lot of text, in which case they're usually going to be for higher levels, but sort of looking at the vocabulary usually helps. Don't you think students will read the information off the infographic instead of speaking freely when they deliver a presentation? Well, that it depends how you do it. If you decide that you want students to do a presentation, then get them to actually create a presentation deck, get them to use PowerPoint, create a presentation deck, and take the infographic away and actually stand up in front of the class and present it using their slides so that they do it properly. Then it's not just a case of reading from the graphic. The other thing is that the infographics, they have basic facts in a lot of cases, percentages, and so that needs mediating by language. You just can't sit down and say 100% of women drink alcohol, 30% of men drink alcohol. That isn't presenting it. So get them to do a proper presentation, and maybe even look at the language that you're using giving a presentation. How can we use the infographics with younger learners? I think, using infographics with younger learners, you can, but it depends on the infographic. Like the one with the facts about animals or I think would be fine, but you have to find the right ones. I had one task where, to get students creating infographics, they created an infographic of the story Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So it can be something as simple as that, getting them to create an infographic of a story, and they have the characters and a timeline of what happens, and they had some adjectives of description for each of the different characters in the story, and that's quite effective. If they're really young and they don't want to handle the technology, they can do it as a poster with some pens and paper. It doesn't have to be a digital infographic. You can have paper-based ones as well. Don't you think students will read oh, I've done that one already. How can I adapt infographics to an intercultural setting? I think, using them in intercultural settings really depends on the information that you have within them. For example, the very first one that I gave you with the first task, which was about breakfast around the world, I think that's quite a good one for sort of intercultural information. You start thinking about, what different people in different countries eat. If you go and actually look online, if you're ever stuck for finding an infographic, if you go to Google and type in infographic intercultural information or infographic plus any topic, and then go to Google Images, you'll find something there. There are infographics about everything. You can test that now if you want to. Go to Google Images, type infographic followed by intercultural communication. You'll find an infographic about it. So, whatever you want to find, whatever you want your students to discuss or gain knowledge about, you can find something about it. So, but it really depends on the topic of what you find, but you can do it. Oh, that one keeps coming back. Can we say that PP could be a kind of infographic? I'm not sure what PP is. Can you type in what PP is if you're in chat? Excuse me.
I'm wondering if they might mean PowerPoint.
PowerPoint, yeah, but yeah, we could say that PP is a kind of PPT. Yeah, you could say that it's a kind of infographic, depending on how you use it. And I think that probably the people who use PowerPoint best, use it like an infographic, and stage the information. It is very similar, except that, infographics usually have the whole chain of information, but some people do video infographics as well that are like a PowerPoint sort of format. Yeah, I don't see why you can't use infographics for any age of students. It really depends on the topic of the infographic and the content there. I think there's going to be a copy of it later, and I'll give you a link to the presentation as well. Can you give us a tip to properly apply infographics with young learners? But using with young learners, be careful about the topic. Make sure there's plenty of images and they're very visual, I think. APA 7th edition. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the acronyms for that one. I'll have to pass on that question. It's too difficult. Infographics, mind maps, word clouds are all visuals to help students learn. Yeah, absolutely. Have I missed anything? Is that all the questions?
I believe so, and I've been monitoring the Zoom chat as well here.
Okay, so what I'll leave you with is I created this little app which is called Infographics for Educators, and it has a collection of 125 infographics, and they're all connected with things to do with education. And the idea of the app is that if you're sitting on the bus and you have 5 minutes and you want to do some professional development, you just look at an infographic and study it for 5 minutes. A different day, you could pick a different one. And it's a way of developing your sort of professional knowledge. So if you want to get that, I'll share the link to it through the chat as well. Feel free to download it and use it, or you can scan the QR code and get it on your phone. So that's just a free app for you to play with. And as I find them, I'll start putting in additional infographics as well and keep pushing new ones in. If you find something that you think would be really useful for other educators, just hit the contact us button and put a link into the infographic and send it to me, and then I can add it into the app as well. So that would be a nice way to contribute too. And the final thing is this QR code is, you should be able to get the whole of the presentation with that QR code, but I will also put a link into the chat now. So there's a link to the presentation there. So if you want to go through it again, pull out the different links and the tasks and ideas, then please feel free to do that. So there it is again. So, hopefully, I've shared a bit of my enthusiasm for infographics, and that's rubbed off on you a bit, and you'll find something useful to take from that with your students, and hopefully the little infographic app that I created, you can use that as well, and sort of that'll help you develop your teaching and educational knowledge a little. So thanks very much for coming along, and have a great weekend, and thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. This is his Friday evening. It's now past 11 o'clock London time. So we really appreciate the time that you spent with us, all the ideas. We're really grateful. And it's just a wealth of resources that I know we're going to get a lot out of. So everybody, if you got your cameras on, give Nick a little wave. And if you're watching the chat, you can see all the gratitude coming in that way as well. So thanks so much. And please come back, everybody, to see Nick again in our national conference. That's coming up very soon.